Well, hi, Roxy. Thank you for joining me.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Yeah, I was so glad when Par introduced us because I've really wanted to delve into this now that I'm finally have the courage to do so. I I feel like there's a never-ending journey to peaking, and I think porn and realizing the truth of what's going on with porn might be the top, I hope. Like digging into as bad as it gets with this whole movement. But anyway, I was so glad to have connected with you, and I'm so glad to see what you're doing with everything that you're doing. Speaking out.
Yes, and I'm so
Um,
glad I came across you through that because I am so busy literally watching every single new creator come on and every single turf. I think YouTube knows by now, so they always like bring in the new people. So I was shown you, I think very at the beginning, and so I was like
really,
really
I was so
happy.
touched to
Yeah,
know that you were already watching my channel. That was really cool. I was
yeah,
like, oh my God, like I've had a
nice.
little bit of that. I had that with Scott Nugent too. I was like, oh, like people are actually that I care about are watching this, is which is, the point.
Yes, but look, it's because we're all hoping for more people to speak up, and I think some are just better at getting it together and getting on the road. I've been talking about creating content for the longest time, and that's why I am personally so happy for anyone to actually come up and do interviews, because that just gives me the opportunity to talk, and I don't have to do all the other stuff at the moment. Yeah,
Well, it's a lot. I mean, it's a lot for you to do that because I personally feel like I don't know if it's me just excusing procrastination because I'm very motivated when I want it, when I finally get to doing something. But sometimes I think when you have it, when you're procrastinating something, especially because this topic for you is going to be difficult emotionally, for you to create content regularly around this topic is a lot
yeah,
more to ask of your spiritual well-being than it is for me because I've never, I didn't have to, this isn't where my trauma is. So
yeah.
I think if your body is still telling you it's not the time, that's okay. And
I
that
think
is just
that is
like,
important.
lying and wait until you're ready. Yeah.
Yeah,
So I
definitely.
support you in joining other people as guests until you end up launching your own content. So I've listened to a lot of your stuff, but I kind of just want to start from scratch and just start with how you got into this because you're not the type, really. It's kind of a shock when I listened to your story. I was like, oh, well, you do have abuse history, so there's that. But you
Yes.
don't strike me as someone that follows necessarily the traditional narrative of how this all happens. If there is a traditional narrative, I don't know if there really is, but
Yeah. Um, and there it is. I think for the longest time I've actually like been very rational about what happened. Like I have explained this in some other podcasts before. Is that I had like a pre-pubescent, or like, I mean, that I must have been already in puberty around like 11 or something, around the time when my mom like when my parents like divorced and my mom moved away, was when I thought to myself, I don't want to be a victim. Like I don't want to be like I don't want to be like looking like a victim. I don't want to be like, I don't want that history of me to be like overshadowing everything I do. And I think this plays a big part in my kind of story, is that I quite early thought I had kind of like understood it like on a rational level what happened to me, and but you know
so
didn't
are you
understand
saying
all of the other trauma.
are you saying that you
Yeah.
made a cognitive choice to kind of toughen up and refuse the victimhood? Because it's interesting. I feel like more the times as a child when that happens, you do it subconsciously. Like you just kind of become a little bit of a harder shell or a tougher exterior, but you seem to have almost done that intentionally at such a young age.
Yes, and it was around sexuality and anything kind of sexual. It was this kind of like when I discovered it, and I have to say to that, like, I grew up in Germany, right? So I grew up kind of like um, catching like the late night sex ads that we have on TV, like like from 10 p.m. I think 10 p.m. onwards, we have like these sex hotline advertisements on TV, and you kind
Okay.
of like grow up with this whole kind of it's everywhere. Like if you go through cities or something, there's always going to be like some sex kino or some sex shop or these hards and the XXX. It's everywhere. It's very uh yeah, it's very prevalent in Germany, like and you kind of
Yeah.
like know what it is, and in school your peers, they will like you kind of know what that's something like the sex stuff or whatever. And I had like I would say, yeah, mature for my age, in the sense that I had already like kind of like you know overstepped the boundaries and kind of like made this kind of world like interesting, or I found it kind of interesting or fascinating because I knew it was shameful and weird way too early, like but I think it was I'm in Germany. I was in Germany. The whole culture here is a bit more like lax with this whole like
Do you think that's a good thing
yeah,
or a bad thing?
it desensitizes you.
Okay.
It desensitizes you, and especially as someone who who has this already broken kind of like boundaries, like that doesn't know what's right or what's wrong, right? All I knew
Hmm.
was very early that I didn't want to be a, looking like a traumatized person for the rest of my life, or I didn't want to be like sexually abnormal because of what happened to me. I wanted to be normal. I just wanted to be normal. I always wanted to fit in. And I think, just rewind back, so I grew up in the most beautiful like surroundings when I was a very young child, at the same time that I was being abused, but only irregularly, like when I was staying at my granddad's for holidays. Um, and but I grew up in like a very beautiful village. It was a foster care village. Like it was a Kinderdorf. I think this is a project that's you like it's kind of like repeated a children's village translated. Um, and they popped up after the war, and they were supposed to be, where all the kind of like lost children after the war were kind of gathered and stuff. And they're like it's a whole village where families move to, and they get like the house and like money from the government to house foster children, right? And that's what my parents were. So I had two older sisters, and with us in the house were like up to 10 foster kids. And I grew up, for example, with a twin sister. So she was a baby when we were both babies, and so she came into our family because my mom was the only one available or able or willing to take this child.
Your
My biological
biological
parents,
parents.
yes, exactly. But I had
Yeah.
like a twin sister because she was kind of like a couple of months younger, and she came to us and she grew up with me. We were kind of like we
Besties.
were like the exact opposites and stuff. Like I was a small and tiny one, and then she was like we were exactly opposite, like dark hair, blonde hair, whatever. And we grew up until 5, and it was beautiful. We'd run out of the like there was kids everywhere. There was no It was a beautiful like village. It was all amazing, really free. I remember like amazing. I have amazing memories of this time. And then I was 5. The abuse had happened in the holidays every now and then. But my oldest
Is
sister
that
was
from your
12
grandfather then?
by that time. Yeah.
Who's your grandfather?
So he was my dad's stepfather. Luckily, he was not blood, like, but whatever. He was still a very good
That's
groomer. Like, he was a very good groomer. So he was like a storyteller. He had like, the model train tracks, the miniature train tracks and stuff. Like he was just
he cultivated a very innocent image so that he could prey on children, essentially.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
And even though you weren't biologically related, that doesn't really, it's irrelevant, especially as a child, because you're told that this is a protected position, that this person is there
yeah,
to be trusted to protect you, and they
yeah.
stole your innocence, and
And
that's not.
yeah, and obviously, like the whole secret thing, uh, my family, they were really amazing. Like this is why, it was such a shock when it finally came out. And it came out because the first time in those 5 years, it was only ever the biological kids going to holidays. And there was this one time when my twin sister uh, had to come with, like there was no other option for her to go to her own mother or whatever, and she came with, and she hadn't been groomed before. She wasn't through that at all. And we came back home, and that's when my mother overheard both of us like kind of whispering about what he does and how weird it is. But more so, it was her being like, "What is he doing? Like, what is this? What is it?" And it's weird. And then I'm like, that's a secret. You can't, like. So that's kind of like what my mother caught, and that's when she burst into the room, and that was kind of like the start of that was the start and the end and the beginning of the kind of like trauma that followed, because I lifted the secret, and what followed was us kind of like moving away within, I think it was half a year or something. Half a year, bam, we moved from like the southernmost part of Germany to the most northern part of Germany. And yeah, that's it.
So
And
they,
my twin sister couldn't come with, and it was just about kind of like leaving the scene. Like my parents were so, like it was so much, their only kind of like thing, or yeah, what came up as well. Like there was some job opportunity, and it was like, okay, maybe this is for the best, so we have to move away, and that's kind of like what happened.
so what happened essentially was you've been trying to harbor this secret because you knew that it was bad, and didn't want to say anything about it because you knew it was a secret that was your understanding that it was a secret that would get you in trouble, or was it something that you were ashamed of? And then I'd like to have you answer that before I go on to the next thing I want to say.
um I can't remember the feeling anymore, but I think, like what it comes down to is literally just being told like repeatedly, like,
Don't tell.
and it felt like and it felt like, I'm doing a good thing by keeping it, because, like obviously there was, like we were allowed to watch TV then, because we weren't allowed to watch TV much, like or whatever, like all of these
Okay.
things that, like, I presume a child's mind will be like, what I'm,
Well,
this is,
a child's mind
yeah,
protects itself. Like a child has to,
yeah,
like that's the way I understand it. I mean, from my own experiences, like your body as a child, your mind as a child, it does everything it can to protect itself, essentially. And like that's how it
yeah,
understood how to
and it
protect itself.
and
But what makes
and
me
it
so
goes on,
sad,
and it goes on for life like that. By the way, actually, it
yeah.
actually
Well,
goes
of course,
on like
yeah.
that. Yes.
And then what breaks my heart is that your world was turned upside down when you were finally when the truth finally came out in a very negative way, which makes me so sad. And I know I totally understand why your mom did what she did. Like I would do the same thing. You'd get you as far
Like,
away from the monster as possible.
yeah,
But
yeah,
the guilt going to somewhere you did not have as much happiness at, but also the guilt of then abandoning your best friend, your sister.
yeah, yeah,
And I that my mom had to do something similar, because she essentially raised my half sister, but when she left my dad, she legally couldn't take her, and it just broke her heart because she was just like, this
yeah,
baby, she can't protect her legally.
yeah.
That's really, did you completely lose touch with that sister?
No, we stayed in contact, and I think, yeah, I think I think the whole family was so overwhelmed with everything. I think kind of what happened with me at that time would have probably kind of fallen under the radar, or it wasn't, because my mom was dealing with it herself. Like everyone was dealing with it, right? Like everyone was dealing with it, and then also going through, should we go through the legal system? Should we? But like it was the 90s, and back then it was definitely gonna be like, kids in court, blah blah blah. Like, there was no child safety, and my mother was obviously like kind of like she knew about what was going to be more harmful in that sense, but obviously we were all overwhelmed, and so we stayed in contact. Like she came up to holidays, but it was really like
The innocence was
yeah, it
gone.
was never going to be the same. It was really we made loads of pacts and stuff, and we had no power. We were just like really, it was just off, and both of us really went on a really really rocky road from that moment onwards.
Of course.
Like both of us kind of like in between, we keep staying we are in contact but yeah, we both went our own really lost ways for periods, for long periods, then found each other, and then kind of like updated each other, being like, oh, ha ha ha, kind of went through the same thing, like drugs and all this kind of stuff, and really horrible stuff. Both of us searching for something, but then also like so far drifted, like we made loads of pacts of like moving together again, but like for example, she is now she wants this like nuclear family. She is really like set on this, like a lot of like she actually went
Well, I
on
mean, of
on the
course she
foster
does.
system, obviously,
Of course. Yeah. You want what you
really
never
like she went
had.
on. We were always the best family that she ever had until 5, and then she went on and into really abusive, like the whole foster system as it is everywhere. It's just unregulated, horrible people, like tons of just horrible stuff. But um yeah, we are on totally completely different paths. She kind of laughs at me because I'm this wild person and she doesn't get me at all. But like we also like in that sense, but we both understand that we are, kind of
Coping.
traumatized, and yeah, um
I relate to her wanting that. I never really had a like I did a little bit like with my grandparents and my brother. There was like a time like the times I lived with my grandparents were just very happy and peaceful, but I never really had that outside of them. I love my mom. I'll always say that, but there was trouble. There was a lot of insecurity. There's a lot of unsafeness. There was a lot of trauma. And like I always shock other rad femmes or when I speak about this, like were I to ever have a family, I'd want to be a stay-at-home mom. I'd want to homeschool. I'd want a very nuclear traditional family. I don't really see that as a possibility necessarily, and I'm getting to the age, I'm almost
yeah
36, but like that's what I'd want, if I and it,
yeah
but I live a kind of a vagabond lifestyle instead. So it's like weird. I'm like a hybrid of the two of you. But I'm curious, I want to circle back a little bit to
hmm
because I haven't made up my decision about this yet, about whether I think like any kind of sex positivity, sex work legalized. Like I used to be in favor of it because I had the understanding that it would protect the women that were doing it more. And then when I've looked at the data, it strongly indicates that the more legalized, the more abuse that's legalized, essentially.
yeah
The more abuse, the more trafficking. And I do think it's bad culturally, like for society, which just makes me,
yeah
it's so interesting because it kind of feels like it makes me sound very much like the conservatives when I was growing up that I was kind of like about, but it in a way they're starting to not conserve. I'm ringing around. In a
no
way, they're starting to be
I
proved
yeah
right because, like, for example, the data is clear. Children that grow up in a two-parent home that are a product of marriage in a nuclear family do better in life. For example, they just do. The data doesn't lie.
I
So
I
I'm
would
curious
also
about what you
I
think.
would I would always, I do think so, like, from a like, idealistic standpoint. I do think that it has an impact on a child's even kind of like awareness of like how the two sexes interact. But the thing is, there isn't enough healthy nuclear families. I think, as we already agreed earlier, children will also, like, a child's mind will protect it from, probably like maybe seeing the bigger picture, and luckily, hopefully, the child will have not seen what I know about, like, what I know of my own father, what I know like of like all of the mothers, the young mothers in my age, or the older women that I know that are either still in marriage or relationships, and or what I see is they like, what I'm saying is the nuclear family so far only works because mostly kind of like women hold it together, and if they
Okay.
wouldn't, if they would actually if they would actually ask for like fair work distribution, they and I will still be very pessimistic here and be like, I don't ever think that, like, it seems to be that males aren't like naturally inclined to just think and act clearly and just clean up behind themselves. But that's just from my own experience. I've never had any contact with any male, and all of my abusers started off being kind of like friendly and nice and lovely or whatever, but they couldn't do shit. Like, they couldn't clean. I had to keep doing everything, otherwise it would fall apart. And I think there's a big, like, yeah, I think there's this neglect of the mother and how she is devalued in
Oh
our
yes,
culture and society,
absolutely.
and how I see it on every post of like any kind of like um woman fights back in a relationship, or woman gets out, or woman kills her abuser or something. There's always millions of comments being like, oh yeah, was the nagging too much? Like, was the nagging too much? Like, did she nag you too much? Like, why did you, like, all of this kind of stuff. And that's what I hate to say and to see, and I wish there was more. And I think this has to be taught from school, and there's this whole like thing
That's
about,
what I'm gonna say.
like, this has to be taught in school. And I think, I come from a Steiner school. I don't know if you know about that. It's
A what?
Steiner school is like a Steiner school. It's like a German school system, but you have them everywhere. They're in America as well. They are, some would say, like kind of esoterical. There, it's like, 100-year-old kind of like train of thought. But what it does is it teaches kids like, holistically, like, you learn kind of like, for example, you learn languages from the first grade, but you learn them by doing movement, and as well as
How
like
you should.
poems, for example, in
That's
yeah, exactly,
the
repetition,
natural
but like
way of
with
learning
the
a
whole,
language, really.
exactly, okay.
Yeah, not
And then like you
conjugating
do lots
verbs
of
before
like
you know
art
what the verbs
stuff.
mean.
Exactly. You learn everything kind of like from scratch. So for example, all of our class, like, you learn how to build a house, but you learn it by, going into the stone, you actually shop and see how it's made, and then you do it yourself in the kind of fifth grade when you're like 12. Or you learn how wool is made, and you make the wool actually yourself with like spindles and stuff. And even
I
the
love
boys,
that.
the boys, so that you uh, understand that everything, comes from, where it comes from,
Work.
and how it's made, and how it actually functions, and that you learn with your hands. And you do girly stuff, like everyone had to like knit, everyone had to like do all the main kind of, what's it called, like crafting skills. Every boy in our schools had to do that. And I think having more of that, where you learn, where you actually actively learn stuff, this would be great as a school curriculum in general. Also, you learn about the plants and nature, but very extensively about ecosystems, very extensively over like long periods of time. Like, it's a very holistic kind of school. Lots of movement, lots of music, lots of art, lots of like doing stuff with your hands and your whole body. And I think that's lacking. I think, I would say, I would hope, and I think that boys going through that kind of school learn, or are a bit more kind of like maybe understanding of life as such, and that it's not like sex roles that kind of like that your life depend on, but that each of you are a person and you can all do everything, and that's it.
You bring up this what I was thinking as you were speaking was it comes down to a lot of socialization, especially of males, and how they're socialized. Because I don't know, maybe I just got really lucky in a way growing up seeing my grandparents, because but my grandpa grew up with a dad who left and basically raised another family and left, and so he grew up helping his mom his whole, like, since he was 12, working and helping his mom, and through the depression and all that. So I saw a very egalitarian, happy nuclear home in my grandparents, in the sense that, like, there was, he helped clean, he helped cook, he helped with everything, and they had a very, very happy marriage and a very healthy one. And in my partnerships, I had one that was very bad, but like I had the guy I was with for 6 years, like, we had trouble and that's why we broke up, but he always did all the cooking, I always did all the cleaning, so everything was kind of equal in a way of like who was doing the most labor. I'm not a very good cook, I will admit. He's an excellent cook, so that was kind of how we divvied things up. It's like he was buying the groceries, doing the cooking, I was doing all the cleaning up afterwards and all that kind of stuff. But there is that, like, I do read about it a lot, and well, you see the data, like, men tend to be happier when they get married and women tend to become less happy, in that homestead life. And that's why. It's because they're essentially working 2 full-time jobs their whole life. And the man is having his workload reduced.
Yes. And the dads are still, they're the fun guys. Like, I have seen it so many times. It's literally like they think they're doing something when they're like bringing them out to do something. Like, literally, this is it. This is the problem. This is the whole problem. And it starts early in the whole, like, peer thing of, like, boys bullying and like going instantly for like the weak ones in class. This is a really big problem, and this is coming from boys. Like, this is coming from boys straight up. Like, I've been bullied brutally. I couldn't go to school anymore. I was literally like, what am I? I was a fucking traumatized child. I literally peed my pants until I couldn't get out of it.
This was
like
boys?
A continuous fucking thing. Yeah, like boys,
Oh, I was bullied, but it was by girls, badly.
I was bullied by the whole class then, but like the main instigators and the meanest ones, they were the boys in my class in particular. But you would see that within the boys group, obviously, and this is one of the major one of the major kind of like cutoff points and traumatization points for boys to be ending up like, as I call them, transvestic fetishists, men who fetishize their repeated bullying for being perceived as sissies. The sissification is actually the fetishization of this particular traumatization that you endured during your whole childhood.
I've never heard anyone say that. So you think that the boys that were called sissies
100%
they end up fetishizing their abuse?
It's a self-humiliation. It's a brutal self-humiliation. It's like literally giving into this feeling of shame and getting off on it. And don't ask me how. I will never understand.
But that makes
any
sense.
Man
that makes
so
sense
depraved
because
by shame. But yeah,
that makes sense because girls do it too. I mean, women that were abused, they they end up somehow becoming like getting in it. I did it. Like, I mean, my ex, who was the abusive one, was the one that turned me on the most. Like, it's somehow it happens. That's really interesting.
Or the natural process of, like, obviously what happens with women, obviously, is still that we have like this natural process of kind of like rape prevention, not in the sense, but like tear prevention, that we still get lubricated, even though it is a really scary situation. And that's what I just have to add in, because that is obviously proven that is like
Yeah.
just a biological kind of like thing that happens. But it is, I know it myself. Like I have been, I mean, yeah, it's
So
a
do you
weird
think,
thing, shame and sexuality. So yeah, shame
yeah,
and sexuality. It's a very a very uh malleable and like also like yeah, I would say yeah, it just has a lot of impact on your psyche, of your perception of yourself, as well as you your surroundings, like, and how they see you, or like it just literally does a lot. And I think it's a lot like the way we are now, the way that sex positivity is going, is that, you know, they don't even question why someone like would fetishize
well,
some
that's what I
certain
was going to
thing
follow
or
up with
whatever. Like it's
is
literally
like,
like
I was going to follow up with like, so why would it be so much more prevalent now than before if it stems from the sissification of being bullied as a sissy,
oh,
then is it as the acceleration
it's not
process
all of them
because
now.
of internet or because
Mm.
of, but that's,
No, I would say the underlying emotion that all of these men have and carry around with them deep in their heart and their guts is the feeling of inadequacy or not being enough. That's literally it. Like literally, that will
oh,
be the one, the
then it
number
really
thing
makes perfect
back to.
sense why it's more
It
prevalent
literally is.
now. The
Yeah.
that would, because I do think that is one of the biggest obstacles facing men, boys growing into men these days, is that their role has been displaced. I saw it with my ex. I saw the emasculation of him knowing that he would never be able to provide the way his father did. And like how there's like an expectation of men and boys right now that they can no longer fulfill. So there's still the expectation there that they're the breadwinners, that they're going to make the most money, that they're going to have this social role, but it's becoming more and more economically infeasible for them to be able to do that. And I do think there is that we're seeing the consequences of that, and their sense of a masculinity, or their sense of that they cannot, that they're not, what was the word you used, inadequacy that men and boys growing up feel in this new, like in this cultural shift that's been happening, and it's creating more inadequacy. So it makes sense that there would be more of a fetishization of that inadequacy coming about, especially when you factor in porn and the access to porn, and how
Yeah.
we see that is physically changing the male brain, like
Yeah.
physically changing it,
I
producing gray
I
matter,
am
making
missing.
it more.
Yeah. But I'm missing like, yeah, sure, women in the workplace. Since feminism, or since any kind of like any kind of like push that women have done, men have never done anything. They've never changed. They've never done anything. They've never actually questioned what they can change, what they can actually like do amongst themselves, and nothing has changed. They're still this alpha male, like dominant thing, father that is being portrayed in media, in all of the movies, in in all of the stuff. There's this alpha male that's portrayed again in porn, and he will be the one with the fucking schlong, like, and they will be casting only the ones that only fit this role. And the whole porn industry works on stereotypes, but like on steroids, like, it's literally stereotypes. I
So
just
you're saying that
created this
all the men
because,
depicted in porn are like the alpha
yeah, like
male?
all of the, yeah, they're all like kind of like they're cliche and like very like misogynistic, like masochistic male, alpha male roles. There is only the alpha male in porn, and then in porn there will be the beta male or the cuck. And this is something that has been coming in the last, like, I would say like 15 years more and more, because like with the advent of like internet porn, obviously we all know that the depravity just literally went off the rails. What we had seen up until then was like, you know, high rates for porn performers, like very kind of like high fees, and like only like these big companies, and like, well, then a lot of like really shabby stuff underneath. But like in general, you could ask for more money, and then the internet came, and then the rates dropped, like the fees dropped. You can't make any money anymore, and then the women and all of the stuff just got more and more depraved from that point onwards. Or that stuff that went on in the kind of like forums or whatever, like communities that happened, finally it came into the quote unquote mainstream. And with this, and this is what I have to say again, racist, like extremely racist, like
I want to get on that.
the kind of like interracial porn is really, really something that got pushed by like companies like blacks.com. They've been pushed by Pornhub, like a really big fucking like really big push, and for these literally like the most racist stereotypes. There is no other way of portraying a black man in this manner, like a very insatiable, quote unquote animalistic guy with like the murder.
Oh, that is going back to
like
that is extremely racist. Yes, okay.
This is so like it's literally like textbook stuff. And
yeah, I mean that's how they were like that's portrayed as the that's I mean that's how they were portrayed since the freeing of slaves or before then even, but like, you know, okay.
Yes, and they are now obviously being turned into these like they've like Interracial got really big because they casted like these, you know, like well endowed, like sometimes, you know, I will get to the secrets of the porn industry later, but like exorbitant, like unnaturally, like that's how they get casted. Like they have to have a really big weapon, and then it's usually very slim, tiny compared to this
white woman.
You know, it's very like and it's like the animalistic blackmail, kind of like destroying the white girl. Like it's very that's kind of like the model, the naive kind of like and then you have the thug, like you have all of the quote unquote like PC like all of the PC goes out of the window as soon as you go on any porn site, because all of the slurs and stuff, they're all there, like they're literally there, and that's how they sell them, and that's literally prevalent in every single niche, and that's how they classify women now. Like, you know, an Asian woman is definitely always submissive. An alt girl, this is something that I had to experience when I got into the industry, is generally always submissive. Like anyone that looks kind of like alternative, has tattoos or whatever, usually also wants to eat something out of a dog bowl naturally. And obviously we have this whole like teenage stuff. We have like the black girl usually being paired with very it's just I can't even get into detail. Who is the black girl usually paired with? Horrendous. Like several, like it's usually it's gangbangs and stuff, and it's about like it's always about so what black porn Twitter has been railing on about forever was that there is no black on black porn ever. It has to be white on black. It has to be always like kind of like, and it has to be this kind of like power dynamic has to be always there. You know, we have sites like Latina abuse, ebony abuse.
So then would the black woman be paired with the white man?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, or several or whatever. Yeah. And then this will be, you know, so it's always like, it doesn't matter which way you turn it, but it will always come out racist. And again, very stereotypical, very, very, the outfits that you get, like everything is very, you know, there is just one box for you. There is just one box. They look at you and this is what you are. You are this niche. And then obviously what internet porn does, like with OnlyFans now, or there's so many like niches and stuff. Like you can kind of like, there is this kind of like dream or hope or something that you can make it with some kind of like niches in between. You know, maybe you can make it as a findom. Findom is something. Financial domination is something that comes out of the internet. It's an internet based fetish, and I will just say fetish. Like
Bunny did femdom, female domination.
yeah, yeah, femdom, female domination, and findom is kind of like the internet-based form of femdom, and it's basically just it's a fetishization of the gold digger, I guess. Like it's kind of like a woman who's
Huh.
like into really expensive stuff, showing off that stuff, and that this stuff was bought by her slaves, like, and she will call the slaves like, you know, walking wallets or something like that, just for the money. They don't want anything else but just the money. Like he's literally getting nothing, and she gets everything. Sometimes they even want to take over or offer to take over the man's like whole life, like, you know, taking over the bank account, sometimes with the wife as well, just take over hers as well and fuck around with her without consent. Like she doesn't know about anything that her disgusting depraved man is doing. And obviously this is like a kind of like fear-based thing, you know, about her taking everything, him having nothing. But like they literally play with this. Like this is some men's whole life, is devoting themselves to some online person, some online woman who just takes your money and says fuck you, and that's all you do. And again, inadequacy. There is a lot of mental illness going on. There's a lot of mental illness going on if
Yeah.
you are going that far as to wanting to do that. You know, pay all of your paycheck in one and be left with daily rations that the woman gives you. Basically, when I got into the industry, like all at the beginning, let's just start where I actually got into the industry. I was very naive. Like I don't, yeah, you know, everyone's like, oh, you, like all the pro porn lobby and everyone that is kind of like, yeah, just incredibly ignorant will be like, oh, but you knew what you were getting get yourself into. And I'm like, no, no one knows who these people are, how they talk to you, how anything happens behind closed doors. Like no one knows. Like
Yeah.
any documentary, anything. Like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, obviously, no one knows what I'm getting myself into. I'm getting sold a dream. Like, you know, I'm meeting a woman at the beach in Brighton. I was a nomad up until then. I would literally had no job for longer than a year. My dream was to be a like a flying salesman, someone who's just wandering around like a nomad and just offers my services. Like I can do lots of stuff. I literally am like really crafty and shit. I can do a lot of stuff. I can build. I can do a lot of stuff. I can't fit into this world. I was the perfect victim. I just left the last corporate job. I lived on a. Did I live in a boat? I think, yeah, I was still living in a boat for 100 quid a month in the marina. Uh, it was a small boat. It wasn't a cool boat. It wasn't a houseboat. It was just a boat. I was just kind of scrambling in there. It's just weird. Anyway, this is my life until then. I was just a shoestring nomad. I like to live without money because I knew I wasn't able to get much. So I kind of like knew how to get by. I was a minimalist and I was very proud of it. But there was this thing. There was this thing of like, you have nothing to show for. You're 27 now. You have wasted your youth with some fucking long-term relationship where all of your sexual experiences, like you from 13 onwards, when I was turned from within half a year, like from a child to I'm a grown up now. I was with men for like long term for long times. Like 9 years was my first relationship until I was like 19 or something, 20, on and off. Like there was some breaks, but it was the same guy. Like what the hell? And then another one, and then I was 27. I was like, I never had like a wild life.
I
I
feel
was,
that.
I just, I got really, really into drugs when I was like 20. I stopped drinking, which I had done from like 14 or something. So the thought that I had when I was 11, it kept me safe my whole life. It's what kind of like got me out. Like this, I don't want to be fucked up by this. Like, I don't want to be fucked up. And yeah, so that's when I stopped taking hard drugs, because I knew, like, everything that I tried, like everything that I did, it didn't help me. Like, it didn't make me feel better. Like, I fought addictions. I fought everything off, because I was like, I tried to like heal my whole life. I really did. And then I met this woman on the beach, and she's like, I'm making lots of money. I'm super rich. I'm 23. I'm driving a Mercedes. I'm
Of
like,
course you're,
it's
yeah.
a lot of money. And I was like, wow. She was
Oh,
she was proud of her life. Like, and
okay.
there was moments again when I was proud of all this money, and then if people were asking me, I would never tell them I was like porn or something. I would always tell everyone that I was a dominatrix, because that's a cool thing. That's a cool
Okay.
thing. Everyone was like, oh wow, that's so cool, like blah blah blah. But yeah, she did the same. She only told me what she wanted to tell me. She only
Of
told
course.
me she was a glamour model. She webcammed every now and then. She did the odd porn scene, but it was just solo porn and girl. And she was minted. She was literally the richest woman I've met until then, because I was never around the rich people. I was just always with
Yeah.
the punks, with the ravers, with the weirdos, with the you know. So she was just, yeah, she yeah. And then she obviously through my raver scene, because obviously kink and rave, like, there is this connection again, and like the subculture, but obviously, yeah, so in the everything that's kind of like artsy, and then yeah, they're all kind of
Yeah.
kinky, and that's so cool, and blah blah blah. So I never was actually around any other people. With the punks were into like dog collars as well back in my teenage times.
Yeah.
Like, it was kind of like normal. Again, it was normal. It was just normal. It was everywhere around me. It was kind of like the edgy people were doing it, so it was kind of like, yeah, well, okay, that's it. But yeah, so she it me compliments like, you're so sexy, because we were on the beach obviously. So I was like, oh really? I was never I never thought of myself as such. I had long-term boyfriends because they looked at me too long, and I was like so desperate to be normal. Really, I was just similar to my twin sister, chasing this, like, okay, but if I find this man, and then I'm normal, and then we are happy ever after, and then it's as if nothing happens. That was my kind of like very kind of childish, I guess, like very traumatized kind of idea of healing, I guess.
Yeah.
Finding the right one that actually is not bad and stuff. But again, I have never had any sexual encounter that I wasn't like kind of like, is it over now? Like instantly, I was like, but I also like I instigated lots, because I
You've
knew
never
that,
had,
okay, that's the validation. Like, if they want me, then if they want me physically, then I'm attractive, then I'm like worthy to keep. Then that's kind of all I ever knew. Like, I used sex a lot. Like, that's all I ever knew or did for when I was afraid of losing someone, like, these partners. It doesn't matter how bad they treated me. I was just so traumatized that I was just like, it doesn't matter. I'll do
no, I'm
something now.
hearing
I was just literally um no again, there was no normality with my body and what couldn't happen or happen, because I never knew that I could say no. But like, no, like, it wasn't. No, I couldn't say
so
no.
I'm hearing a few things. You you were conditioned, that's my read take on it. You were conditioned to associate your value with your sexuality. And so your value, like how you understood your self-worth was through a man wanting you sexually.
I guess, or if he stayed with me, then and if I
Yeah.
did
So
all these things,
yeah, I
then
relate
at
to
least
that
he stayed with
deeply.
me. Even
Yeah.
though I literally think of myself, and I know, like, thinking back after every relationship that I've left, I always thought back, and I was like, why this guy? What, like, it was coming
I,
out of a
yeah.
bad dream, literally, like, what
And the
the
other
fuck,
thing I'm
like,
hearing
literally,
though,
literally, yeah.
The other thing that's coming to my head, it sounds like, I want to clarify, you've never had a sexual experience that you actually enjoyed
No, not with my long-term partners. No, no,
ever? Like, I
no, with
mean,
the
I
men.
like never
No.
felt like you were connecting or making love or anything like that. You always dissociated from your experiences sexually and
Yeah,
waited for them to be over. Okay.
yeah.
That's,
I always like kind of like floated off and kind of like functioned, and I knew what I
you
did,
dissociated.
and then I validated myself of being like, oh yeah, I can do all these things. Like, I learned how to fake orgasms, and then I have to say, everyone does it. Everyone did it. So how could I
Oh yeah.
measure, like, the like, how could I measure if, like, and then all the girly teen, like, magazines would tell you like, oh yeah, no, this is all good, and yeah, oh, trying anal is totally fine, like all of this. I endured every single practice like under the sun, because it was normal. Like, it was even written down, it was like in the women's magazines, it's like all completely normal, like it's all normal as long as you both wash yourself and you agree to it. And then I'm like, yeah, okay, I'm agreed to it because, like, it's normal. And how, like, well, yeah, well, um, I guess so. And reading, and the jokes, like, yeah, we all fake orgasms, like we all do the whole like, oh yeah, just roll over, or something. Like, all I heard this, that's what I heard. That's what I heard from everywhere.
Yeah.
And so how can you gauge what's normal? How can you gauge what's healthy? How can you gauge what's healthy in this environment? And then you look at porn, and then there it all goes again. There's no measure for women to actually understand what is healthy, that none of the practices are actually doing anything at all. Like, I did lots of stuff and they did nothing. But, and what else can you do? Like, if you're being literally taught in porn everywhere that this is normal, like that you.
It kind of circles back to the nuclear family. And I do think that I take your criticism of that in terms of it being on the mother to govern that situation, and that it doubles her workload and all that stuff, and that can negatively impact women. But the reason, I had an interesting exchange with someone on Twitter about this. The reason, so I was under the impression that the reason that two-parent homes were better was like an economic situation, like, just more secure. But I guess the big part of it is that relationship is how a child grows up and understands relationships between, especially romantic ones. And if you have that healthy example,
Yeah,
it fundamentally, it matters.
but how, yeah, and yeah, this is it, like, how in a society that is literally just sexualizing sex instead of making it about love. And literally, like, my whole life was filled with this
I
quest.
mean, it breaks my
Okay,
heart for
like,
you that you've never
literally,
even had a
like,
had
with
any.
men, no, I had relationships with girls, but always really short ones, and they were actually nice. But again, there was also a moment where I always identified myself as soon as I understood sex again, whatever. I identified as bi, and this is very important because I knew this was like around, I must have been like 13, I guess, and it was the early 2000s, and this was when bi was added to the LG. It was very important because I know
So
it
are you
still. I was a
bisexual?
teenager, so I now identify as a uh, traumatized lesbian, I guess, but traumatized in that sense because um my family is, I think, kind of conservative or whatever. And I was always the black sheep. Like, from as the youngest, I was literally the craziest. I was very wild like, I was literally just off the rails from puberty, just mentally just overloaded. And again, with this quest to be normal, with this quest to heal. And I think there was a couple of things, and this will be one phase where my mom did therapy, like, uh, studying counseling, becoming a counselor herself, and going through a very short phase of getting into a segment of psychotherapy that is not a good one, where it was about like forgiving the perpetrator. and we went to a couple of conversations with like that, where she wanted, where a lot of focus was on how I should forgive, how forgiveness was probably the best to move on and stuff like that. Very, it did a lot of stuff,
No.
and I think this was one of the reasons why I stayed with a lot of these abusive men, because I held on to this, like, the flame of the good man, like he's in there and he might be just traumatized in his life situation and blah blah blah. You know, my granddad was some war veteran, like World War II. Who gives a fuck? I don't give a fuck. I never should have given a fuck, but obviously I was very, this is very very important. My kind of like that development of really confused thoughts in my head, kind of like trying to make sense and being very rational. Look, my whole life I've just tried to like think about everything and make it really like, oh yeah, I, I understand. And I got also into psychoanalysis and stuff like that, and try to kind of like counsel myself and understand myself, right? So there's big patches where, you can't do that to you. You can't do that. And then the second thing is obviously me coming out and my mom just saying like, oh yeah, but like maybe it's, it's very early for you to say that and stuff. And maybe it's because, your trauma and stuff like that. It makes a lot, and it made
Well,
big
I do
impact.
want to
I
ask
still
about
remember
that.
that.
Just because the way you're talking about being a lesbian, it does sound like it can be rooted in trauma. Do you think are you sexually attracted to women? Does that get you off? Do you feel connected to
Yeah.
it? Okay.
Yes,
Cool.
I always did, but I always had like really, I grew up like very rural, so there was not really anything happening here,
so it
right?
was natural. Like it
I
wasn't.
didn't have many opportunities, right? But I always, as I said, called myself bisexual, and then instantly got into relationships with men who talked to me, literally talked to me, saw me. I was in relationships, literally like all of my relationships started with me meeting the man and being with him from that moment onwards. Yeah, like
My guess, and this could be totally inaccurate. I do want to say first, I don't think that lesbianism comes from abuse, because I'm
don't
not
think so.
lesbian, a lot of women I know aren't lesbians that have been abused. So I don't think that that's,
No.
it sounds to me, and it's just maybe I'm just projecting my own experiences, but it sounds to me when you dated men, it was your subconscious way of trying to heal your trauma. It was like
Yeah,
you going through and
really.
repeating habits to try
Look,
to
yeah,
kind of fix it.
yeah. Like everyone saw that I was struggling, I guess. Um, and so had a very, had a very, had a very just, I hated myself. I hated being a girl. I hated being like, there was a lot of this going on for a long time.
Do you think part of the reason you would dissociate from sex is because you weren't sexually attracted to men?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that makes sense.
definitely. All I ever put together with this kind of stuff was like this disgusting stuff, that this, like the stuff that I saw in porn. Like it was like I knew that this kind of like part of sexuality is kind of like this kind of like icky stuff, but like it kind of has to be like whatever. Like it's normal apparently, whatever, and you just have to do it. But
And did
there is
you
always this kind of like, yeah, it was really shameful. Like yeah, yeah,
did you
always
watch
did.
porn quite young, like as like a,
Yeah,
or
way
were
too
you
young.
just kind of like you would look it up and watch it yourself?
I also did that. Yes,
Okay.
I also did that. And again, so I'm the youngest. Like my aim was like, overstepping the lines, like always. Like I was just literally just I think just asking for help. I looked at my oldest sister, and so she was 12 when it all came out, and so she did basically the opposite of what I did. So she went like kind of inward, right? So very, yeah, like she didn't
Did
have
she
any
go through that
relationships.
too or
Like,
no?
yes, we did, all of us,
She,
all the three of us. But my oldest, um, my so we are like literally like a kind of like the perfect kind of study of outcomes, if you
all
want to
three.
say it like that, because my older sister was 12 when it came out. I was 5, so she was obviously already hitting puberty. It was horrible, and she she's very traumatized. She has
Did he
really
trade
not.
you off? Like, did he stop doing that to her and start with you?
I think he did it. He did it at all ages.
Okay.
Didn't. It wasn't about that. He took pictures and stuff. I think like my sister, my older sister, didn't. She doesn't talk about it. Like it's yeah, she's not talking about it. We don't really know like a lot. I'm the one that talks the most about it. I think also because yeah, I think there's a lot of the yeah, it's my kind of like trauma thing. I'm kind of an open book when it comes to that. Trying to heal, like kind of looking always.
Yeah.
So this is how I developed because I always saw her. I saw how hurt she was, and I had her as a kind of reference. I knew, not sounding bad, but like I knew I didn't want to become like her. I knew I just didn't want to turn
She shut
inward.
down.
Like she never had a relationship. She is at home. Like she just works a lot. She's just on her own. She is very traumatized. She is she never, so thinking back as a rebellious teenager, I was very critical of that. And I have to say I was, very naive, but like, I looked at her
Sorry.
and I was like, I can't, I'm sorry.
No, I just, I,
Yeah.
God. No, I see a lot of, God, I'm sorry. I try really hard not to do this in my channel and to let people talk, but it just, I see a lot of what you're talking about in my own sister, and I talk to all these other women that have gone through this, and it just seems like it just never ends. Like this,
Yeah.
and the lack of care and the lack of punishment, like this stuff,
Yeah.
it's a lifelong, um, lifelong struggle. It's
Yeah.
lifelong pain you're inflicting on somebody to the point where either you you actively blow your own life up or you retreat and don't live a life altogether.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. No, it's fine. Yeah. Um, uh, but yeah, so the and this is why we have to abolish the whole sex trade because only
Yeah,
because of the sex trade, the whole
it's
sex
just
trade, women like
it's
me stumble into that because they don't want to become like that, for
yeah,
example, right? Like because there is no victim help, there's no actual like system that kind of understands how women become like this, for example, like how many women get on to like can't hold a job because they can't. It's very hard to be socially because it's emotionally
no,
like
I
draining
mean
a lot of.
you're
Yeah, so it's how can you be a worker, how can you be employed, like this is one of the reasons I got into. And like yeah, like my sisters, so many other survivor friends that I have the same thing of like they can't hold down jobs properly, like or they get fired or whatever. Like it's a repeating pattern, and it's really hard. And this is kind of like my yeah. This is this is the basis of the destruction. Like this is not opportunity. If this is the only way that you see, if this is the most well paid job that there is, and this is how I was sold off, this is how I was sold into the industry, was like, oh, this is the most, like you can't make anything any more money than in this industry. Like in this industry you are gonna be, you're your own boss, you set your own hours, you're like independent, you get to travel somewhere, you get taken out for lunch, like this is all stuff that someone like me,
yeah.
someone who's like struggling, like if you hear this shit, and if you hear that anyone, like even someone looking like you, even someone alternative or fat or poor or whatever, like they find a niche for you, like they find a niche for you. There's a place for everyone, for every woman gets objectified around here, and this is how I got sold off in. And it was a really, at this point in my life, like, 27, like, I got nothing. Like, my dream was making a lot of money and then buying that piece of land. I just want that piece of land. I learned permaculture. I'm actually just want to live like self-sustainable, just on my own, away from all these weirdos, like from all this stuff.
Yeah,
And
I
that's
hear you
my
on
dream,
that one, man.
and that's
Yeah.
how I literally stumbled into this madness. And someone who doesn't have any body, like, literally, I was so disconnected from my body. I will say I fought heavily against, like, feel like I was bullied a lot for looking like a man, like looking like a boy, whatever. I always had like short hair. I have like a big nose, whatever. I don't give a fuck. It makes me
I love your
smell. And I was
nose.
like,
I'm a big
I was like
fan
a
of big
defender
noses.
of I was a defender of like this kind of like body neutrality thing. If anything, then this would be me, right? Like, just being like, look, this is what I have. I don't give a fuck as long as it makes me think, walk, talk, smell, taste. I'm fine. Why would I even look myself in the mirror all the time? Like, why? I don't care. You're gonna have to deal with it. And I have made a lot of like rebellious decisions, like piercing my nose. Like, at one point I was walking with like a bamboo stick in my face, literally just to be like, I not to
Fuck
be
you, I like my
ugly, but
nose.
just like, I this is my face. Yeah, look at it. Just look at it. I don't care. Like, if you think this is somehow, I was just like, fuck you. This whole thing was really big before I got into porn, but like, porn makes you really insecure and doubt yourself. And this is one thing that I have to say, as someone who hasn't been on, I wasn't on social media before that. Okay, so before I got into porn, and what got me into porn was knowing nothing of the internet whatsoever, or the depravity. I knew nothing about Reddit, knew nothing about Twitter, really, or what it was, or how, or nothing. I was on Facebook. I had a Facebook account, but like anonymously. I was always very, like, the internet, very, didn't have a clue what was happening at all.
Yeah.
I knew a couple of porn sites existed, but like the bigger scale, no clue. So when they said like, oh yeah, you might be in the internet or something, I was like, yeah, well, the internet, like, it's some huge place, like, who's gonna see me,
And you ended up getting quite a big following, which I
really, yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
then
But I
so
didn't take it really seriously. Like, I didn't take the internet serious. I was like, yeah, well, this is
you didn't
some,
understand the
like,
repercussions
no, no, no,
of like,
no,
yeah.
no. I was like, of all the videos and places or something, no one's gonna see me or whatever, and like, like some wanker somewhere, but like, who gives a fuck? And
Yeah.
there was really, this was one of my biggest things. And then again, getting told that I'm pretty, which wasn't something that I was told, or sexy. Like, oh yeah, you could really do that, and your body is really stunning. I was like malnourished like most of my life, because at that time I was a raver, so I was like really just definitely malnourished. And I had muscles, so I got into the industry with like fetish modeling, muscle modeling, like a lean, sporty kind of like style, alternative. And I thought, oh yeah, you can do like artsy stuff and whatever, nude photography, whatever. Again, this woman who groomed me told me she was glamour modeling, and she was doing like, you know, private private collector stuff. I think she was telling me this a bit later. What I didn't know what that is like, private collectors are usually just like, just they're just sex buyers that tape stuff. They just literally make tapes, and they're just sex buyers. Like, there's just random guys. Some of them can't even take pictures of videos properly. They're just random guys, and that's
Well,
how you make a lot of money.
That's also kind of why I find, like, how do you expect people to regulate this industry at all when people shoot it in homes? Like, there's no regulation of this that I see working.
There is none.
Like, even
as soon as it is filmed, there's no regulations, right?
And there's no incentive to unionize this kind of. There's no.
Well, there is unions, but they are pimp unions, so there will be, and then obviously again, how do you regulate an industry this industry? There is no way to regulate it. Okay? This industry is based on abuse. based on ashamed women, because no woman in this industry will ever come out with anything. There's tons of blacklists that women have themselves, but because of rivalry, because this industry is also built on rivalry. Okay, so how this thing works, okay, and this is how I got out, is by understanding this is literally the same pattern that any narcissist psychopath is gonna do. Okay, he's gonna obviously future fake. He's gonna love bomb you. He's gonna tell you, oh, you've got so much potential. This is really amazing. If you have any concerns or something, he will be like, oh, well, then I'm just gonna get another girl. So there's I don't know what that's called again, but like this, I think it's like triangulation or something. It's like, well, there's like, if it's not you, then I'm just gonna drop you, and then another girl gets the thing. This is literally everyone. Like, this is the whole industry is future faking. The whole industry is telling you, if you get into the industry, there is a chance that you will end up with a fucking huge mansion and all of the cash. And then once you're in and you've gone down that road, you've kind of like, similar to an abuser, you got into the relationship. He will then turn the stuff. He will abuse you. This is what happens at scenes or in prostitution or in a strip club or anywhere else. And then you are still dependent because you've already gone down that road. You're already been like kind of like stigmatized yourself because you have, gone down that road that is not a normal one. You're probably gonna have to like keep it a secret from people. You're gonna if you are going out, or you're gonna either tell them a lie or you will tell them something like I did, like I'm a dominatrix, like comparably to everything is fine at home. Oh, that's just a bruise from cleaning. Like, it's the same thing, Are you fine? Yeah, of course I'm fine. Of course I'm fine. Like, I'm making lots of money. It's the same excuses. It's the same strategies. There's tons of men getting into this industry that have probably already got convictions. Some of them certainly do have previous convictions. There's only fake names. That's for safety, they say, that the men have them as well. It's kind of like for their safety as well. It's all very, like it's the perfect breeding ground for abusers. No one's like there with their real name. Only the company knows the real name. When it comes to prostitution, or in my case, dominatrix business, there is no willingness of the man ever to reveal his identity, even though prostitution is legal in the UK. It's said to be like standard to be screening guys. There is no way that these guys will ever give out their name, ever. They don't give out their fucking name. The percentage of men that gave me their real name is literally like 0.001 before the meet, so that you can verify him, so that you can kind of like look up in some register maybe, or you can, I don't know. Lots of men obviously take a bird.
Well, why would a man tell anybody
up their phone number?
Yeah.
So there's no screening. So again, this industry is literally the perfect breeding ground for abuse. There's no way of ever fully removing this aspect of it, the possibility of it, ever. And this is how it works. In prostitution, it's because you get the money at the beginning of the session. You get the money from the sex buyer at the beginning of the session. And at that point is when he starts to dehumanize you. He will just want his fucking stuff now. He wants to have the money worth of what he is just paid for. If you do one bad move, like I did, I'm a really shit dominatrix because I do what I want. I always like, well, I'm a dominatrix. Like, I literally do what I want. And if I find something funny for myself or hilarious, then I'm going to do it. Like, if I'm into like humiliating you because you look like a fucking idiot right now, then I'm going to do it. And some of them don't say it even, but some of them aren't into humiliation. Some are. Like, basically being a dominatrix is like the opposite of dissociation, which is what you can do in prostitution, and especially really good in pornography. You have to be really aware of what this guy wants 100% of the times. Like, he gives you a list beforehand like of fetishes that he writes down, like a menu, and then he comes, and you don't like. Some of them are awkward, some don't talk, some like, so you're gonna have to fucking like just wing it. Literally every single time you're just gonna have to wing it. You have to be very alert. You have to be 100% all the time. Also for your safety reason, but also to understand what he wants. And hopefully, obviously, for him to come back. Because you always want him to come back because,
More money.
if it is someone who, if it's someone who is worth it kind of thing, you have to act that out like all of the time. You have to be 100% aware, and that's how I came to understand. That's how I got really into their minds, but also understood that they are definitely not submissive in that sense of they literally submit to you and your every will, and they do whatever you want, and they respect a woman for her authority. Oh no, they don't return if you start your session off with, which was my signature move, was like getting them on all fours and like riding in like princess saddle and making them really stupid, like just really silly, like really dumb. But I was like, I'm a princess now, like, fucking get on your knees, you silly looking fool, like, most of them didn't like it, and also not my move with because there's always like really big mirrors in the dungeons. I always made them like sit very closely and just look at their own disgusting face, and not and they weren't allowed to look at me ever, and just think to themselves how disgusting and pathetic they are, that they are actually sitting there doing what they're doing, being a fucking pathetic.
So did you get
it was a good job, like,
it sounds like you didn't get many repeats.
No, they didn't come. These ones wouldn't come back. Some of them, but like, yeah, that was my mistake, and that was. But I also wasn't. That was like one of my rebellious acts. I was like, I'm not gonna stop doing that. I'm doing what I want. Like, but again, it made me really shit dominatrix for the purpose of getting repeaters. Many repeaters, but I had a few. Like, I won't lie, but like only those ones that were into humiliation and extreme humiliation, because I unleashed everything that I had, and I think I talked myself into that. This was my kind of healing and whatever, but like, that's how I got into it. I started modeling, and definitely was dominatrix from the beginning. I never wanted to do porn from the beginning. I was really determined to be this man-hating, brutal, tiny woman, basically. But yeah, like I was shit at in that sense of like doing what I wanted the whole time. So my favorite ones were the ones that came back, were the ones that were into really getting humiliated for being pathetic men. My niches were ball busting, like kicking men's balls, and chastity, putting men putting chastity cages on and telling them they should stop wanking and like thinking about sex all the time. I had some really good ones where we got a bit deeper, and I was like trying to get like kind of, look, you have to just connect with your emotional level. I was really trying.
So there were situations when you felt like you were actually helping somebody.
I thought so, but like, again, the moment will. There were probably 1-2% where I talked myself into, well, maybe he actually cares for what I say, maybe he actually cares. And I did actually with the ones that were into more like advice, like give me advice on how to be, relationship advice and how to deal with women and stuff. And they gave really good advice, and these were the moments that kind of kept me in the industry for a long time as well.
Yeah.
That I thought this was kind of like valuable or something. But again, I will never know, and this is the second rule of pornography, is like, it always is like the level of depravity doesn't end. Men that are watching that stuff that I produced or with something, men that are already arrived at like femdom or whatever, they're gonna go further. Like, they're.
Well, that's the thing. I think that's the addiction element, right? It's like a gateway drug to depravity, and that the more you use, the more you do it, the more depravity required to get you off.
Yes.
right?
Obviously,
The
obviously.
tolerance level
And
for depravity goes up, essentially.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And with what we have available now, like obviously, it's gone out of the, it's just out of every imaginary thing. Like,
Do you think that
um,
it's
uh,
femdoms that deal with AGPs a lot the most? Because
that's
Bunny, who I
the
spoke to, it
biggest.
was dealing with AGPs that made her a TERF.
Yes, that's what I did as well. HuffPost did an article on it. Vice did an article on it, and it is the most requested fetish in the femdom industry. Like it is the most requested fetish,
Autogynephilia?
and it's getting more and more.
They didn't, the
Sissification.
Huffington Post an article about autogynephilia?
About
Or
sissification. About sissification.
really?
About
And Vox did.
transvest. Yeah. Yes. They. I've got it somewhere on my phone, but like I've just recently read the part on Wikipedia again. If you go on Wikipedia, type in sissification or feminization activity, it will pop up, and then you see research or something or cultural, I think, and then it will show you the percentage. But yeah, it was just like the most requested fetish is like a really big thing, and it's always been. Again, how do men arrive at that? Men that arrive at that will be those bullied men, probably mainly, obviously. They will maybe already like grown up with the feeling of like comparing themselves to the quote unquote alphas. I always call these men like, they're incels, but some of them have like the, it's kind of, yeah, some of them have been dealing with the sexualized woman for so long, with the image of the sexualized woman, that they literally think it's like that they literally think that yes, women are the better sex. Like there is one thing, there is all, maybe these are also some, yeah, maybe it has something to do with how they are brought up as well. I'm not sure, but I think there is something, like there is definitely an aspect of that.
Of that women are the better
um
sex or the better
like they're
person?
so beautiful, like they're beautiful,
Oh,
and yes, and yeah, and they are the better people because of their own depravity. They know of their own depravity. They know how men are inclined to be sex fueled monsters, and that's how they talk about them, and all about themselves as well, and how they like to get rid of that, on how they feel that women just got it more in order. And that's one reason or one aspect of why men come to femdom. It's a kind of like very it's an idealistic thing, but then again, maybe that's just something that they tell me, and then it's not even true, and they just actually
well,
come to me and just fetishize me and fetishize being degraded. I
yeah,
don't
it's
know.
hard for me to
I don't
believe
really
that.
know. Like,
So,
they also know how they treat all the women around
well,
them
that's the thing is
badly,
like
and
it's
they,
hard for me to believe that they're coming from as a place that they really think that women are better, because their arousal comes from like the idea of themselves
yeah, it's
as
kind
an
of, yeah,
abused, subjugated woman. So
yeah.
they fetishize that abuse.
Well, this is before the. This is before. I'm still talking about men before they identify as such, or before they, or on the path. Let me just, that's just
Okay.
men on the path. So men on the path, okay. They are not ending up, and it's not like a. It's not like a. For some of them, it might be because they grew up in a household with like women, and they watch porn, and then they're like kind of like, you know already starting. But I guess, and then like I assume it starts with like, inadequacy about the body, about the performance, about how, never having any luck with the ladies. Yeah, the performance of the masculinity, but that they can't even work out in their own terms. Like they could, they don't have to be a certain way. They can just be their way and be working on themselves and be better human beings, but they don't. So they get into porn.
It sounds like what you're saying is it comes down to people not fitting in the box that society determined that they belong in. They're receiving some
Yeah,
notion of what a man is supposed to be. They don't measure
yeah,
up, and so it
exactly.
yeah.
Exactly. So they degrade themselves to beta males. Okay, so that's what they call themselves. That's what a lot of
Mhm.
the men call themselves before they might go down the road of feminization. Okay, so the beta male is these are men that are virgins. They identify themselves as virgin. Some of them are still kind of like, yeah, but but I want to be a man or whatever. Like, and I'm trying to
Are they
become
actually
like a
virgins?
potent. Yeah. A lot of them, and because of obviously of our culture now, some of them are very young. Like some of them are only like 20 or something,
No.
but it's such a thing, and they already turn up at femdom at this kind of like level, and you have to understand these will be men that, you don't arrive at femdom. You will start with normal porn, whatever it gets to, maybe anal porn. For me, I think like anal porn is the kind of like cutoff point for a lot, because with anal porn, then there comes the male on male porn. There's a lot of like this kind of like cuckold stuff, so that there's an alpha male, and then there's the beta male that's only allowed to watch. It's kind of like similar to like the swingers
So
swinger
some guys, the
scene,
most depraved, they'll
where the single guys are always left out because no one wants them, and it's kind of like a fetishization of that. I think that's one of the first kind of like crossovers that I think where men will see themselves kind of portrayed in this role, right? They're the scenario is that they're with a wife, and then the wife is so underserved by that like weak man that can't perform, that she's gonna get herself someone else and then humiliates the man in front of him, like basically, okay, by having an alpha kind of like deal with her, right? That's the kind of scenario, and I think that's a big kind of like crossover. That's where these both men roles are kind of like displayed. There's only those, okay? There's only the alpha male, and
and the
then
beta.
if you aren't that, and then you're that, okay? And then one step down is, the emasculated male. There's a lot of castration fetishes that's been a thing for a while. And
No.
again, it's like, I can't perform. This is the measure. I can't do that. There's all these quote unquote tens that I want. And again, this is insult talk, okay? These men want beautiful women. They want beautiful women. They're so pornified that all they can do is think about, I want this woman, and no, like, if I can't have that, then, so then they go, okay, I'll worship this woman then instead, right? I'll just worship her. That's the kind of like sell. I'll get on the knees, and at least she's gonna have contact with me. This kind of, I guess, this would be the kind of like starting point, or or I'm gonna
Of becoming
fantasize about
AGP.
this powerful woman. No, first of all, just like being a submissive, being a male, and then
Okay.
devoting all your life of like about feminine stuff and whatever. And again, the AG or the transvestism comes like, we have talked about how we don't really understand how or that shame and sexuality go hand in hand, right?
Yeah.
Again, there's men who ejaculated from getting kicked in the balls by me. They ejaculated from that. Let that sink in. There's men that are getting turned on when their dick is being shoved inside some metal thing, and like squeezed, and being told like, this is gonna like stop. And they really, that's kind of like someone telling them no makes them even more, right? It's just being demasculated, being told no repeatedly, like, rejected by the women, like, you're not good enough, you're really not good enough. Now what the porn talk does, and there's the crossover thing, there's fetishes that go along. So castration, chastity, so putting the dick away, and then small penis humiliation is also a really big thing. Men wanting to get told that their penis is not big enough, again, compared to the porn stuff. Like, this is a big niche. It's a really big thing. It's getting bigger and bigger. And then virgin humiliation, like, there's lots of like
Yeah.
humiliation based on that. And what these dominatrixes do, and or the producers in the film, is like they already humiliate like a small penis. Oh, that's just a clitty. That's just a clitty. Like that's a really big thing. It's a really big thing. And there's the crossover. So the too small of a penis, the kind of like the shriveled up kind of thing. It's not nothing more. It might. I mean, you're so unmanly there on the floor. You might as well be a woman. Like you might as well be a sissy. You're a sissy. You're such a sissy. You could never make it as a man. Like so, and there's no other shtick then. So a sissy, all a sissy does is all that is being a whore basically, like because that's all a sissy is, like all a feminized, all a feminine, all femininity is being holes on legs, cleaning, like being a stupid maid or something, like like
Yeah.
and then like there's nothing of substance there that is like that goes to like, oh, they actually fetishize being a woman. There's no autogynephilia. Like I hate this word because it's like, no,
There's no love of
they
woman involved.
fetishize. There is the fetishization of everything regarded feminine, cleaning, being on the floor, scrubbing, being on the knees, taking a dick. Like this is all it is. And then sexualizing yourself and bimbo and the obscenity
Symbolification.
of like, yeah, like all of this like dumb and ditzy thing. Like they've got so many, and this is the thing. I always think like not only porn, it's the media. It's like they can look at just literally they can look at videos. It goes from old school, like I believe the early AGPs and stuff. I think this goes hand in hand with media, and no one's gonna give me any other explanation. The transvestites started with like glamour models, with like more widespread media going out of women like made up, dolled up, pin up girls, blah blah blah, at the same time as feminism was going up, so women getting more rights. I think there's like this,
Can you
oh
I'm
yeah,
sorry, can you clarify what you're saying? So you're saying that like at the same time of the women's rights, like the second wave feminism movement in like the 60s and
the
70s?
first wave even. So
But
the first wave even.
so during
The first
suffragettes?
wave even, that yeah, the suffragettes, and then the 20s, we have the roaring 20s, we have like women in short hair, but then we have like the pre-war and then the war with like pin-up girls and like
Okay.
I think around the war times there's a lot of that. That's why we have like these transvestites in the Nazi era. I don't know if you saw these pictures, but like Wehrmacht soldiers in the
Oh, in World War
German
II, like the
Wehrmacht
Nazi
soldiers
soldiers dressing up as women?
made, yeah.
Yeah,
Because there's this. This is a really good, like, this is a really example. Even if it's just fun what they did there, even if that's just fun, it just gives you an idea of how they saw the women portrayed and how impactful that is. And
that's so
again, this
interesting.
was while women were getting
More
uppers,
right. Yeah,
being like, and then the men could be like, oh yeah, so they're trying to be like the same, so they also wear like pants and short hair and stuff. Still a big stigma around obviously men in dresses. Like even though the women were allowed to wear pants now and do short hair, the men were like, oh, we can't do that. Like we can't be wearing dresses now as men and stuff. And then back in the 20s, like 100 years ago, the only explanation would have been that, like, obviously because like homosexuality and all this kind of stuff, it has to be like twisted into the right place again. Okay, if you are gay, well, if you are gay, and again, the first transsexual like on magazines, he was also turned into this like glamorous figure, like
oh, for sure. I mean, you see it
this
even with Caitlyn
what
Jenner and like,
yeah, and this has happened over and over because it's about this, because glamour became this thing because it was more widespread, because these magazines got more out, and because this standard and this like this glamour. I think this is something that really, this might have really like correlated. And again, we see this in the gay community, how they're drawn to like, Madonna or whatever, this kind of like glamour
The
stuff,
divas,
from
yeah,
early
for
on,
sure.
because it's like beauty, it's form, it's kind of like made beautiful, and they
So
only see this
is it
masculinity, and there's only that is there. That's the only other option that there is. And again,
right? That's what I was say is like
yeah,
they're like, okay, I can't
yeah,
reach this ideal. Maybe I can reach this
yeah,
ideal.
yeah.
Okay.
Weakness, weak men. Like again, I straight up say all of the slaves they're all like they're ugly. Like and they know it themselves. They talk about it themselves. They're quote unquote like they're not they're not stunning. They're ugly. They know
Yeah.
it. They're ugly. They know that they are. They're like skimpy. They're hunched over. Too much fucking gains. Like they're they,
It's
just like
this.
they can't. Yeah, like how they know it. And again, that's not how you get on the market. Like if you talk about like they will not get women like that, and they know it,
No.
and they rather go down this road. They rather go down this road. They rather be a beta male, or again, like my latest slave, and the one reason that I really finally like really peaked and understood. No, 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 boy, no, 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 no.
Yeah, I want to
This
hear this whole story.
this was the guy. Longest paying, not most paying, but longest paying. He always came back. That's why I know so much about him, because he always like unloaded his stuff and his stories. That's why I know that he came from a single mother, and she was also a Munchausen by proxy, and that's why he has now a water allergy and some other like stuff, some other
Water
health
allergy?
issues. Yeah,
You
I don't
can't
know.
drink
It's called like,
water?
no, he can't wash himself. He can't get his skin in contact with water. He gets like lots of like blisters and stuff. It's insane.
Because his mother
Like it is
medicated
just
him
one
with
of the.
stuff?
Yeah, his mother was a Munchausen by proxy. Yeah, and he told me all of this, and I knew all of this. I knew that he was obviously, yeah, he was like bisexual from a small village somewhere in England, somewhere. Yeah, again, we are not living in times where like all of it is like easy and stuff and being open out or something. Nothing is easy, and especially for someone like he was like really insecure, really like
Oh my God, trauma.
up for validation. So he paid me for like he was a slave who just wanted to be treated nicely, like like he didn't want to be humiliated. He just wanted to be served, like he just wanted to serve me, and that's it, kind of thing. That was his whole thing. Very insecure, and I have to say, I had a bit too much of empathy for this guy, because he was gonna get really depraved. He is really into horrible stuff. I followed him on Twitter. Like at some point, I allowed him that I follow him. Like I follow him back, and I have to see all of this fucking stuff. He's really depraved into really horrible, like femdom, femboy, and some manga stuff and all this kind of stuff.
What's manga?
Really, oh, sorry, hentai, like Japanese drawn pornography.
Oh, okay.
Very disgusting. Like they
Yeah.
draw like really
Tentacle porn and
disgusting
stuff.
stuff. Yeah, and yeah. All definitely also like P adjacent stuff, where they sort of children, like yeah, like looking or
Oh,
cutesy, or this kind of like
pedophile.
yeah.
All right, yeah, I did want to ask about that too. Do you think how hand in hand is your experience with AGPs and pedophilia?
Um, yeah. Just looking at every single trans flag wormhole. If I ever go on like likes lists from some viral TRA tweets, it is like this. The there is no like, if you have reached this far as to feminizing yourself, taking hormones, and wanking in women's clothing, there is no limit. Like there is like the stimulation points aren't that
Now, do you think
there
that
aren't that many anymore.
do you think it's more that they are only turned on by the idea of themselves as children, or do you think that they are turned on also by watching the abuse of
Both,
children? Both.
both,
Yeah.
both. Again, being children, it's just about, again, being degraded and humiliated if they'd ever do that.
And the
It's
least
like,
powerful.
that's why they do an exposure. Like, that's why it's a part on part, like, kind of dangerous to retweet all of these fucking horrible looking men, because they probably thrive on it and they actually know what they're doing. And
Oh
they
yeah.
they
They I
do.
mean they
They
thrive
they
on the
do.
that
Like,
that's
they thrive on knowing that everyone's uncomfortable and knowing what they're doing. Like, they know it.
that's
Like,
why
that's
it's
their
so
whole.
difficult engaging with any AGP TRAs. It's like, how do you engage? Everything turns them on. It's like there's no
Yeah. Yeah.
and nothing's more
So
powerless
again,
than a child. So
the
obviously,
yeah, powerless, and again, how they see it. Again, a powerless. That, like, yeah, women and children are powerless, and they're perfect victims
buckholes.
for abuse, and that's how. Yeah, that's literally just how it works, and that's why there's lots of men who do it openly, but also men who unload this during sessions or talk about stuff in DMs before. I always, like, I always kicked everyone out that was openly up for that beforehand, but you can also not stop that if someone's talking about this stuff during a real life meeting or something. It's quite shocking.
Like especially as someone who's experienced child
Yeah.
abuse like that, it's
And obviously I was very clear, like, lots of dominatrixes have, or we all have our no list or something, like, don't ask me for that. And I had to obviously also put in Nazi play as well, because I had way too many men asking me for a Nazi role play because I'm German. Yeah, and it wasn't
and
good at
you
all. Like,
experienced the BLM element coming in too, right?
Yeah. So yeah, during BLM, this whole niche of, again, I told you, right, the journey to feminization porn and or this kind of like sissification stuff is through the inadequacy based fetishes. And again, not all of them actually wank or something. Many of them literally just like watching this stuff, dealing with this stuff, because it has taken over their whole life. They see themselves as these identities, these porn brained identities, as losers basically, and that's their whole stick. And they watch this stuff every day to humiliate themselves, to not all of them, many of them wear chastity cages and they can't even masturbate, and yet they come back on the internet every single day to spend money and or watch this self-humiliating stuff. And it's very bizarre. Some of them are heavily into the interracial stuff, because it then like, it shows them, they could never be that. They could never be as alpha as this man is portrayed, which he is always, always huge men. And that's their basis for and obviously because they are on screen with a white woman, most of them are white men that are watching this niche, but also a lot of other races. That actually has no limit, but mainly it's white men. It's the customer basis. And they've already kind of like got in this mindset of degrading themselves with that. And then there's the perfect like femdom based niche, which is called like the crossover is interracial cuckolding, which is again white women in partnerships, but sometimes it's also like just single white women selling themselves as women who only sleep with black men because they're like the better choice.
Man.
And that's kind of like already the kind of, I mean, they play it off the of the animalistic and very racist kind of stereotype thing, that's kind of like where the humiliation for that white male comes in the form of the cuckolding scenario or idea. Or imagine I was her boyfriend and she would make me just watch her actually get pleasure and I can't be that. How great. Like, that's just so bizarre for me. But like, that's what these men are coming from and for. How I reached this was I was about to stop mainstream or any kind of like pornography. I already like had my
Out.
I was 2 years in that by that point. I was 2019 when I was like, no, I'm not doing that anymore. I'm just gonna stick to dominatrix and that's it. Like, that's the only thing that I can do. Yeah, then this man contacted me and kind of like saw, like, he already had probably like seen what I had written before, which was me ranting on the Twitter timeline, being like, oh my god, this whole thing, what the fuck. I had outbursts like this every now and then, and lots of online prostituted women on Twitter do that every now and then, where everything bursts and they're like, what the fuck? Why are you all not paying me? Why do I have so many followers and none of you are paying me? And all of you are doing are like commenting under my pictures instead of sending me money. Like, what do you think I'm here for? Like, what is all this? And then I was ranting about the mainstream pool of men, like all of the men that I had met so far, then all of the abusers, like lots of them, like lots of the performers that I dealt with, that when I was a newbie slided into my DMs, that's what they do. All of them collectively do. The producers do it. And the thing, that's what I wanted to say earlier, actually, like, this is the whole like manipulation and grooming thing. Like, you're just new on the business scene. Like, you have like a small Twitter profile, and then there's big producer with like high profile follower numbers sliding in your DMs and being like, oh, you're cute. Are you new? Do you want to shoot with me? And we would look so hot and blah, 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 blah. And that's how I had experienced lots of men, way too many. And I got into really bad
Porn
scenes. Porn, exactly. One thing that I just want to like bring in, because I said as a dominatrix earlier, you have to, like, compared to prostitution and or filming, you can't dissociate. You have to be in the room. You have to be present all the time. And yeah, what I had experienced until then was, way too many scenes, and then the men turning out to be fucking absolute assholes afterwards, sometimes stealing my videos, like, not giving me the content, or I had to it's just all of the mix. There was all of the stuff was in there, like all of the stuff that you can, turning out to be stalking, or telling me I shouldn't film with any other man now and just film with him or whatever. Like, I had lots of them. Like, they're all like that. There is none of the men that now look back, like, none of them weren't like that. They're all abusive. Like, they're all literally have the same pattern. They slide into newbies. The M's pretend they're like really interested, and they have thousands of them on the go. Some of them freak out. There's lots of women that come forward, but then it just is like one Twitter thing where some women are actually interested in listening, and then the career-oriented women, for example, like, there's this whole, like, because it's so competitive, you're like, oh yeah, but like, maybe that was just her. Maybe it's just like, they had saw lots of that on the timeline, like lots of women coming out, even showing like evidence of violence and stuff, and then some other ones defending him, like, literally it's all of the times, and there was no way of like trusting anyone. Obviously the STDs that I had until then, I never had any STDs until then, and then even though I got tested every 2 weeks, I pretty early understood that I was really responsible, and a lot of the other, and especially the men, they don't give a fuck. Like, they literally they aren't responsible. They might also do something with someone outside of the scene that hadn't had a test, or whatever. And then a lot of women on the side obviously have to prostitute on the side, and all of the clients are now asking for oral without condom. So they have to do it. There's no other way of like, and then some of them talk themselves into, oh well, they wouldn't have any STDs because they have a wife and kids at home. There's a lot of naivety and like talking yourself kind of like, you know, talking, just pretending it's fine because it's just what you have to do. Like no porn performer solely exists on this just shooting scenes or something. You're gonna always have to like wiggle, do something else, webcamming, stripping, yeah, doing multitasking, and the levels kind of like increase depending on if you have no money or had a really bad month. And then if someone offers you something and makes it sound really nice and you're really desperate, then you might say yes at that one point, and then you might tell yourself just as one time, whatever,
Yeah.
So I'm already in it. I'm already kind of desensitized. I already kind of like know how to behave. I already understood kind of, that it's all like professional, because professionalism means that you arrive on set, you have your clothes and your makeup with you, and you're really friendly because you don't know these people, and they all tell you be professional, but no one tells you what is professional. I mean, and then they tell you like, oh, if it ever is like really rough around here, girl, or something, then you can say don't worry, we are here for you. But then the camera starts rolling, and by that time all you think about is where's that camera, because they all always talk to you and tell you, look at the camera, you are the main character here, you are the main character. So from the moment where the camera rolls, and again, this is, you haven't had any, you don't get the money until the scene is finished and until the ejaculate ends up on your face. So you have the camera in your face, they expect something from you. Someone has told you, be professional, and you're like, yeah, I'm friendly, I don't know, like whatever, and then I smile and whatever, but you don't have any measure, you don't know what's professional, you don't know. Anyway, the camera's on your face, you are being filmed while being like literally being tossed around. You don't know that person behind you usually, you don't know that man. You have changed like 3 sentences with him before the scene. You might have hopefully seen him go into the shower before the scene. He might also tell you that he's already showered, and then he didn't. And then you have to still be taking it in your mouth because the film is already rolling, and then you're like, you don't want to be like stopping the scene because they've already shot like the intro, how you got into the room, how you said your stupid 3-liner, like maybe stopping now, or like whenever it's uncomfortable, stopping now isn't an option because the film is rolling. Mostly it's gonzo, mostly they are like all in your face all of the time. Like, that you are disrupting their flow, their workflow. They told you to be professional. They told you to be professional. If something goes on and it's really uncomfortable or painful, you're going to be like, it's probably only going to be a short, little longer, because they're going to be, it's, I can't stop now because I'm going to be professional. Like, it's probably going to stop any minute now. It's probably going to stop any minute now.
Yeah.
And this is what pornography is. This is what it is. There is no empowerment. There is no actual power, because as soon as this camera rolls, you are the puppet. You are the puppet, and you will not stop anything. Like, especially if there's if there's a camera in your face. And again, how many of us women have admitted that we have faked orgasms before? Like, how many women have admitted without pornography that you just let it happen because you don't really know how to say no? Like, you don't really want it. You don't want it. You don't want it right now. You're really tired. You fake a migraine. Like, we are not told to say no. We aren't told to say no.
Especially not to say no because we just don't want to. Like, that's the, like, I think that's a,
That's it.
How did you end up finding your way out? It was during lockdown, right?
Oh yeah, shit. Oh god, I was actually still telling you a story about the fucking sissy guy. So yeah, so I had this abuser that had groomed me, again, like lover boyed me. He was like, oh yeah, so you are like a porn star or what? And then I was like, oh yeah, I used to be, but like not anymore. I'm like a dominatrix, and that's it. And he was like, oh, you're not like the other girls. The sentence that always got me, because I wasn't like the other girls. He was really like attractive. Like he was the first one in my life that, like, before that I had like the scraggy, feminine looking guys. Like, they weren't really like,
Good looking.
I don't know what, they weren't good looking or something. But this one was like a quote unquote, like, he was a model. Like, he modeled once and stuff. Like, he was like, yeah. And I was just like, well, this is too good to be true. Like, this was that man that was like, yeah, this, like, if he saw me now, like, wow, he saw me, that's insane. How can he see me? I'm really weird. Like, what the hell? And then if he wants me, that must be like sign from the universe. Like, that's my chance to be normal or whatever. I don't know. Like, it was literally just like that. This man talked to me like he was just this model guy, and I was a weirdo. That's it. And then that's it. But the bar was very low, and then he, well, he knew the sex industry a little bit or whatever. He had to deal with like some escorts. He said turned out to be like all of them, and especially trans identifying males. And which was when he told me that he's like really into, he's really
Wait,
into
so
them.
I'm sorry, will you say that again? He used to get with trans identified men, like he
Trans
used to hook up
identified
with
male. So
them.
yeah,
So he had a
he
fetish
has,
for.
yeah, yeah, exactly. He's a sex addicted porn. He's literally, he's the opposite side of the of of the inadequacy, but like beta male or sissification fetishes. He was just like alpha. He saw himself as an alpha, like, so he basically fucked everything that wasn't
A man.
gone. Like, he literally
Okay.
was a porn addict. He told me why and how when it started with his baby mama. He had a really horrible childhood as well. Like, it was really bad. That was one of the, like, or maybe not. He definitely did have a bad childhood, but he was a really bad asshole, and he had no remorse, and no, he was a psychopath. Yeah, I think he was a psychopath. Like, he was just insane. Again, porn addict, grew up with porn, grew up with like the alpha male crowd, right? Like, he was a thief, and he did like really lots of like illegal stuff, went to jail and all this kind of stuff. I think jail did something to him. He was Black Jamaican. Maybe he was bisexual. I never know. I don't know. Maybe it was also. So there is this thing about porn and affecting sexuality, in that sense that I don't know if
Yeah.
so either it is that this man was by and because of his upbringing, in Jamaican culture, and definitely in this kind of like London Jamaican like kind of yardie culture, that there's definitely no place for that, definitely not.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
very homophobic.
so there's this thing about him then being a porn addict and then going out kind of like fetish, like watching trans pornography, and then going out, because he was living in London, going out as a young man, yeah, to go to trans identified men,
Okay,
these
so
pornified
okay.
ones. And so basically, yeah, before he met me, he had already gone deep into that kind of like scene and route, and but he only came out to me with that afterwards. Like, he called himself like straight, and that's one like peaking point, or one moment where I was like, what the hell are you fucking trying to fucking tell me? When he's like, yeah, I'm into, kind of all women, like also masculine kind of looking women. So with him was the first like real doubting scene where I could call myself a sister, because he kind of talked me into this whole, like, yeah, because he was dealing with all of these trans people. He was dealing with lots of trans people basically at that point. He was also into trans identified females. Like, yeah, it's all really weird. But anyway, I
Oh, so
talked
he
to him a
wanted
lot
to have
about,
sex with like trans identified females and trans
yeah,
identified males.
yeah, everything basically. But again, I talked to him about it, and it was just about, yeah, with him, it was definitely about. He was also into like super fat, so that's a fetish basically. Like that's not a. I don't want to be like really mean, but like he
No,
was into
fetish is a
anything
thing.
kind of. He was into anything and everything kind of disgusting, and he even said it like that. He was into disgusting stuff, disgusting kind of women, and kind of like, yeah, disgusting and weird stuff, off stuff, and that's
And
what
he
he was
caused you
chasing.
to and
And
and how did
he, yeah, got me into the whole like, oh yeah, I mean, you could be kind of like, you make a great twink, like this kind of thing.
oh, he was trying
And
to get you to transition.
yeah, like kind of, yeah,
Huh.
yeah. And
And
by
that was
that
kind
time,
of
I
like,
was already saturated. It was like everywhere on Twitter. This was like, 2020, like 2019, 2020. There were so many already, so many women that even in their time as a nude or online prostitute kind of then changed identities and then started wearing like kind of packers and stuff, these things to fill out your
oh
pants and stuff.
wow.
And there were like moments where I was like, oh yeah, maybe I could do that too, like, because yeah, I had many moments, again, I was bullied a lot for looking like a man. I have like, because I was always skinny, I had like this Adam's apple, and I was like, oh my God, I'm probably like got too much testosterone. I had the exact same questions that a lot of detransitioners seem to have, and even transitioners, if you look at MTF. I was like doubting myself a lot, and this is what it does because, I was so saturated with that, and there was so many around there that I was like, oh, maybe that's a thing, maybe that's a thing, I met so many on porn events and stuff, especially
So
trans-identified males, that it was like so kind of normal. But I want to say one thing: it was very clear to me every single time that they're all men. Like it's always so obvious, all of the men. So bizarre. Like, and I met lots, and there is some female porn performers that have this whole persona, and they also have to be like, but you see that the men are literally have like just covered it, like literally just copying these pornified kind of like women, and it's just bizarre, really bizarre. Yeah, so that's the kind of like, that's the story. I was a kind of like desensitized. Again, in my head, I still, I wouldn't have thought of myself as an actual man or whatever, like, but I've just thought about this whole like identity thing and being, or looks. It's just looks. It's just looks, you know. I was like, oh
so
yeah,
you
that's
thought
also
about
edgy and cool,
transitioning.
whatever. Yeah, no, I thought about like wearing packers and being, yeah, standing to pee or something like that. Also because I was so lost. He was talking to me lost about it. Yeah, I was like, yeah, maybe that's cool and edgy. Like, maybe I can be that girl that like stands on the street corner. At least I don't have to fucking go on the toilet anymore. Maybe I'll just stand to pee everywhere. I don't give a fuck. It was just more
So
like, I would never.
what made you then decide not to go that route and to quit?
Lots of abuse, lots of cheating by that guy. Him literally like fucking with everyone behind my back, even women that despised me. And I had like fights, or I had like women that had the same. Some abusers before that, some men would tell that stole my content, or there was lots of men who would like talk shit about me, like, and about lots of other women, to keep us. That's also a really big part in the industry. So they do that, and on purpose. Like,
Oh,
if she
to
ever
yeah,
contacts
to
you, she's a crazy woman.
divide and
Just like
conquer.
the whole lots of that. And my slave ended up being like the only person that I could talk to about, because he knew, because by that time this abuser and I would make content like interracial porn for these men. Mainly, like, I didn't do sissy. Okay, you have to understand. I stopped at beta male. Like, for me, it was men that I wanted to humiliate, but not into becoming a woman, but like just for being men, and for
Yeah.
being too stupid to get their shit together and being porn addicts, and that's it. That was my shtick. That's it. And I would give them the videos being like, look, this is what I do with my men. Like, you could never be that. And what it did as well, which is one of the things. So in the porn industry, I had to deal with all these white men contacting me, giving me like calling me baby and showing me their penis and stuff like that in DMs unasked for. And with having this partner, this black man, I could be like, I don't do it, any of you. I don't do that. Okay, I don't. Like there was this like it was a very good like boundary
Protector, like
for
very like
me.
this is what I like.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. There is very kind of like very strategic, and I have to say that in reference to all the abuses that I've already then encountered. So he was kind of like the knight in the shining armor. Oh yeah, I'm not like them, because I had obviously tell them about what happened to me, and he was like, no, I'm not like that. Turning out he was gonna be the most devilish of all of the men that I've ever met in my whole life. And then so this slave guy heard everything about it because he was missing. I couldn't provide content. This guy was off. He was doing his own thing all of the time. He was literally like never. He was just insane. Like he promised me everything, took all my money, but left me with a few clips, and I couldn't. I had to just do something. I was just there was I was just left on my own because I had already like built up this whole like persona and thing, and that's all these men were wanting. There was nothing else anymore. So that was really the shtick, and he
So
was
basically,
the only one that asked me how I was, and I was like, yeah, no, this man just what the fuck, this is horrible and stuff. His response would have probably been, oh, cis men. He was already like he was definitely talking like that already. He was, fucking cis men. I didn't really like, I didn't even notice that. I wasn't really aware of the whole like cis thing at all. And then a little time later, when I finally had my like point where I understood, okay, this abuse that I experienced in the relationship is the same thing that that I have had my whole life, and this industry is literally the pattern is exactly the same. Okay, the pain that I feel and all of this is literally the same. I need to get out here, and that's what I told my slave. I was like, slave, great time, but I'm out of here. I understood. I'm traumatized. We also trauma bonded over that. So he was like, oh yeah, I understand. He blah blah. He told me about his trauma. It was not a really good like dumb relationship in that sense. But his response to that, I was like, what am I doing here, sexualizing myself and like expecting something from men if I know that they're fucking useless. Like they're not gonna pay me more and more. Like it's just it's what the fuck, and none of this makes sense. And I'm gonna getting out of here. This was the worst decision of my life, and I finally understood with 31 who I am in my body, or like that I'm not that in my body. And this is it. I made a whole philosophical out of it. His response was, "Oh, mistress, this is so empowering what you're telling me. Like all of this authenticity that you. That's why I followed you. That's one of the reasons you're so authentic and you're so you. And because of that, and because you've heard so many of my other like traumas and stuff, I want to, or like, because you know me so well, he didn't say it like that, but because you know me so well, I want you to be the first to know that I am a woman. My name is, I'll just give it Anna, and my pronouns are she, her." And I was just like,
fuck off.
shocked for a second. I literally have to, because he also begged me for one session. I have to be like very, very clear. Okay, this was my longest slave. I had not good boundaries, and he was like, before we even chatted or something, he was like, or at the beginning, before it went any further, he was like, yeah, but before I need one more session. Like I've got money saved up. Like So I knew that like kind of like that money. I needed money because I was gonna get out. And he was the last guy that I've ever saw. And my reaction to I'm a woman, she, her was just knowing what I've just told him. Like, my whole process, it took me 31 years. This guy was back then like 28 years old, highly traumatized. And I knew in my heart that he wasn't healthy. Like, I know that's why he was paying me. Like, he wasn't healthy at all. Like, these men aren't healthy. I knew that. Like, no one does that. No healthy man wants to pay someone lots of money with a very low income as well. He had a very low income, was working for the NHS somewhere. And I knew that in my heart. And then this is what he comes up with. And I'm like, did you have any, like, so you're sure? So did you have any therapy? And his response, no, they don't have any trans-inclusive therapists. And I was like, no, I mean, like, did you ever talk about what happened to you in your childhood and stuff with anyone, like, except for me? And he's like, no, I'm over that. And I'm like,
Clearly not. Yeah.
for me, what I obviously, men have the emotional capacity of a teaspoon. And this is what I will stand by, and this is why I will never believe that a man can ever feel like a woman, because first of all, the woman is not a feeling. A feeling is something like shame, disgust, hate, sadness, fear, happiness. You know, to give you a couple of examples, there is none of that combine all of them together into feeling like a woman. This man felt a lot of that. Self-hate, shame, disgust, all of these things. And I had just came up with understanding that all that I did was feeling exactly that. A lot of really shameful, really bad feelings that led me down believing that this was the right place for me and the right road of dehumanizing myself in that sense, and not actually listen to my body and my soul and actually reacting and getting out. And this is what this man comes up with. This man has there is no emotional intelligence there. There is none. And this is why, and this is how men come to think of themselves as women, because they have no brain. There is no brain. There was no brain. When I repeatedly asked him, like, are you sure? You know, because you know, I know your story. Like, I know how you and your mother broke your wholeness. Like, you know, you are your body, and your mother did something with you that clearly had an impact of you. If you are too dumb to understand it, I can't grasp it. I can't grasp anyone that has a history like that, just being like, that's totally what I am. Like, without any therapy, without any help, without any physical body involving kind of like activity. And then, so that was the short phone call. After that, my mind was literally like just overflowing. And that's when I went onto the internet. Two other things happened, but like I went on the internet and like got into like the J.K. Rowling stuff and like read all about it, because I saw it but I was too busy with the being abused and never really
so you
thought
had
about
like that was your moment when you started researching.
Yeah, and I understood what the fuck's happening. I understood that what he means, he actually thinks like this is like he actually now can declare himself that, and I have to obey that, knowing what I know, knowing that this is a porn addicted, very traumatized, but yet still purposely going on the internet, watching stuff that promotes this, watching porn that actually it's not only like people talk about sissy hypnoporn, but it's like sissification pornography, like generally just scenes of men ugly men getting dressed up and being humiliated, or women solo. I've done lots of videos like that, very easy to produce. I just have to talk into the camera and be like, well, I didn't do it for sissy, but I did it for like beta male humiliation. But there are women, you know, just talking to you directly and being like, you are pathetic. You get yourself like a little panty, and then you, you know, turn yourself into a cock hungry, blah, blah, blah. You know, that's literally what it is. And they get themselves, I knew what this guy was up to. And this is literally it. I know what they're doing. I know it. I know his whole timeline. Every day he's on Twitter, and every break that he has from his work, he will be on Twitter looking at disgusting, depraved porn. and there's no other life. He has no other life. He has gaming and porn, and there's a lot of men out there, and that's what it is. That's the root.
Wow.
And yeah, and then I went down that rabbit hole and understood how far they are in the law and what comes behind it. Because again, in pornography, I saw all these trans porn stars, like they are just men with breasts, um, getting more famous and getting more hype over the years. I saw it, but I knew they were men. And the few scenes that I was offered with these men, they were paid lower than me. Like I was still paid like a woman, and they were paid like men, because
Huh.
men are always getting at least half of the payment of women in this industry, because they
Wow.
do
That's
it
interesting.
for free. Most of them do it for free. We'll have to be very seriously, okay? The women uh, have to be pitched with really high money, and the men, they will do it for free. They don't give a fuck. I had lots of men requesting to be my filming slaves. Like that's for them a free way of getting their rocks off, or getting their humiliation and
Wow.
being on film and tape and stuff. So that's also the kind of balance that you have to see here. Men do it for way lower, way lower. Like for them, it can only be a hobby. Like there's not really like a way of really financing this for yourself. But yeah, so that was this realization, and then the last session was the last like fucking like really understanding how bizarre this man is, really. Because up until that point he was really friendly to me, but when I started questioning him, he was a submissive. He was my devotee. He was like on the floor and licking my feet and stuff like that. And that by that time I waited with the session. I did the session with him, and then after the session, and I never because obviously I don't have to pronoun or whatever. I just talk with him like you, and that's it. Like I didn't have to do anything,
Yeah.
but it's just very awkward. And then after the session was when I sat down with him and yeah, understood what, like how far
Oh
this
my
man has
God.
drifted off and how far he's willing to go. Because I talked about J.K. Rowling, and he was like, "Oh no, he's transphobic bitch," and I was like, "I'm a Harry Potter fan. Like this is just great. Like this is not happening. Like and what she wrote and whatever was not happening with him. None of it." He became more and more hostile, and I knew like this guy has to go now. Like I'm glad that I got my money now, but get the fuck out of here. And one of my last questions was, uh, it was really awkward and stuff. Was so like he was like, "No, I always felt like a woman." I'm like, "Bruh, you have I know exactly that you weren't, because you were dealing with me. Like, I know what you are telling yourself. You were just a beta male. I don't give a fuck. Like, you talked yourself, you talked about yourself that way, so you can't pretend. Like, I know. Like, what is
Mhm.
this?" He was just persisting. He was like, "No, I'm like that's definitely what I'm gonna do, and I'm gonna get on the NHS waiting list. But that's also really transphobic, because the waiting list is really long." And I'm like, "Yeah, because there's way too many of you fucking suddenly wanting this shit. Like, what are you fucking doing?" So one more question. So are you gonna? So you want to do this now? So you actually want to do this now without any therapy? He's like, "Yeah." And then and you want to get into our rooms? And he's like, "Yeah, I'm a woman." I'm like, he is this fucking square fucking, he's just a man. Like, he's literally a fucking man,
Yeah.
a fucking ugly ass man as well. And the last question that I had was like, so are you gonna do the slip and flip? Like, are you gonna cut it off, or what's happening? And he's like, "No, I don't have any dysphoria with that." And
Of course.
that's, yeah, that's where like everything just like, I just needed him out, and he was out, and yeah, and that's when I was like, literally, what the fuck did I do? What the fuck did I do? My first thought was like, how many men went on to go further than that beta male humiliation bed? Because I will be the jump off point for many of them. Then they will search for someone who does the next part, in the transformation, in the degradation, in the absolute humiliation. And that's kind of like my, like, wow, this is insane. And this
Yeah.
is when I needed, or like I wanted to, that's when I reached out to a couple of women on Twitter and stuff, and then that's when I got my interview. Like it will be like half a year later. I moved away. I moved to Ireland to my sister for a while. I just got out completely and disconnected. My stalking partner was still stalking me, trying to pay me back the money, but he never did. Just drive me insane, I guess. And yeah, that's literally it. And from that moment onwards, I've just felt like I need to talk about this because
yeah,
it's not my fault, because again, like for me it was just about humiliating men, and like they wanted it. I don't give a fuck. Like it was fun. There was something that I talked myself into, that it was a good thing for me to do that after this, after the abuse that I endured, like, because that's, at least there's a way of doing that safely or whatever. Like, there's lots of ways of for me to talk myself into that. But yeah, the outcome and the kind of like, yeah, I saw it around me, and I saw a couple of other dominatrixes, for example, questioning this whole like fetishization and feminization thing, and I already felt that in my heart. I would never like say that, because a lot of them were asking, like lots of my paying slave were like, oh, are you doing that? And I'm like, no, I'm not doing that. But basically, there is so much, like there's so much of the depravity that you like put onto this whole, like, oh, it's just a kink and stuff, that the connection to the real world, like it's really difficult when you're in this industry, because again, the industry is very binary. It's very clear. Like, they're just beta males. Like, and even if they have this fetish, like, which, as I just wanted to say, but then I forgot, the dominatrix says some of them would question, be like, why are we doing this? Like, why are we putting men in women's clothing and humiliate them for being like in women's clothing, and for all the feminine, like, and make them do quote unquote feminine, like very stereotypical stuff. Like, that's very sexist. Why are we doing this? Like, this is very misogynistic, and like, what is this kind of stuff? And then lots of other women be like, don't kink shame. So there is no way of, in this industry, even questioning any of these practices. Like, there is no way, because it's all normal now. It's literally just no kink shaming. This is just a kink. Anyone consenting, blah blah blah. There's no way of doing anything about it. So yeah, I didn't understand that these men would go on into the real world and actually be pretending to be women. Like, I just thought, well, yeah, put yourself a fucking thing on and whatever, but there's this slave, and he
now it's coming
now
into the real world
to do this.
Yeah.
And that's it. That's the cutoff point. And that's when I, and then I thought back to all the moments when my abuser had been caught again with some other transvestite or gay transsexual, and I had caught him, and I just saw all this depravity. I just knew that none of this is like actually organic, and or like
Right.
based on anything but this kind of like boundary breaking, this kind of like weirdness, this kind of like homophobia, the way that this for example, this man who called himself she her, he could only, or he only wanted to be like penetrated when he was dressed up as a woman. Like, that was his fantasy then. Like, definitely bisexual, like this slave guy. But yeah, again, very interesting to see that he had to
Be his identity.
put up these fucking disgusting roles, and it just shows you how sexist this whole thing is, and this is still very in porn and porn culture and macho culture influenced, that he can't be anything else but that. There is no other path, and this is very, very important. Yeah.
Is there any other thing that you feel like you wanted to mention before I just ask you how you would want? So I always want to ask like how you would try to encourage someone else to speak out about stuff that's going on that if they're afraid to, but I do want to ask first if there's anything that you felt like you wanted to touch on that you didn't.
Uh, no, I think it's all said. I don't know. I can talk about lots of stuff, and I can get like frazzled
I
up
mean,
in lots of different topics. But I think, and I hope, I've brought down the topics that were or are very important to mention.
yeah, I mean, and I learned a ton, and you've given me so much to
Yeah,
think about. I think that my one of my biggest takeaways is that this is so like that our rigid gender roles are so culpable in even what's going on with porn is like
yeah,
who yeah, that's so interesting.
it's very
Um,
important. It's very important, and it's for
and it just
women.
also shows you
One
that
last
there
thing.
yeah, go ahead. No, go ahead.
Well, for women, obviously, there's also like they say it's like getting a bit better, but like the mainstream and or the well-doing productions or whatever or what you see everywhere is still like a very it's always these stereotypes, obviously depending on race and ethnicity and look and stuff like that. Look is very important. Yeah, it's very strict as well. So if you don't fit into any of this, or if you look like this but you don't want to do that, you know if you look quite androgynous, but you don't want to, but you don't want to be like a submissive, which is what usually happens with like any kind of non-conforming
Non-conforming
woman
woman
type
has to be submitted
will
to.
be, will be submitted, like has to submit because at least if she's not pretty, you're gonna do that. It's like come on, like there is no respect and there's no way of ever justifying anything that porn is and does. Like it literally is the most racist, classist, then lookist or something. If you think about that, like plastic surgery fueled, insecurity based industry that has ever existed, and it is based on the abuse of women, and it is perpetuating abuse of women. It is giving ideas to abuse women. It's given instructions on how to do it. It's a grooming manual by just showing it to women, showing it to young teenagers, telling them this is normal, which is what happens everywhere, and never questioning anything that is happening behind the scenes. And this is literally it. This is literally it. It's the perfect basis to groom entire generations,
Generations.
literally into anything,
100%.
fucking them up on all levels, and it's literally not okay, and none of it will ever be okay. And uh, there, videos that I've done, stuff that I've done, there's no respect. There is no. There is no anything. As soon as I, for example, would have released my name, the stage name, I've never released my stage name because I will never do that because I don't want any abuse. Like I can't handle that. It's actually very traumatizing. I could never speak up with my stage name because men will use that to make it even harder for me. And this is why I speak up.
Good for you. And what would you say to anyone that wants to speak up but is afraid to right now?
I can say a lot as someone who I'm currently like on benefits or whatever, and I have literally nothing to lose anymore. I don't care at all. If you can, if you can speak up at least in private, like speak up with your friends and speak up with anyone. Go stickering and do stuff. Stickers are really great. Like do anything that you can. I think everyone has their their talents and their powers. If you have the urge to speak, then speak the way you want to do it. Do videos if you want to do videos. You don't have to show your face, but if you do, it's great. Like there are so many possibilities. Yeah, like if you feel it in your heart, then talk. And now is the time to talk because
We're hitting a
look,
fever
like
pitch.
like women have to, like we have lost all collective consciousness. And I think porn and all of this culture has actually led to that. And I think
That's really
if,
a good point, is a loss of
yeah,
collective consciousness,
by,
especially when
and
the
what we
people
are
that don't,
seeing now, they call
yeah,
it intersectional or whatever, but like they have, identity politics that's created like, this, there is no women, collective women anymore. And this has to stop. Like
I
we
do
have to
think that
actually see,
intersectionalism has been a detriment to rights.
yeah,
And I used
in
to
this
be an
sense, yeah,
intersectionalist, and while I still will acknowledge that, like, I understand on paper it was important, especially, you know, what I the issue I take with it is, like, if we're really intersectional feminists here, then we're going to care for the women incarcerated right now, and we don't,
yeah,
because there's no one more vulnerable than an incarcerated woman, and we're not standing for them. So
yeah,
that your intersectional feminism can go kick rocks, in my fucking opinion, when it comes to that.
yeah,
But I also think it's you see it even in what's going on economically with what happened in Ohio with the train derailment, and then you think about what went on in Flint, the division of the working class into just even racial issues.
yeah.
It cripples any ability
And
to, it
exactly,
cripples the movement,
exactly.
because
It
because
cripples
intersectionalism works to
class-based.
it
Yeah,
works to divide the oppressed, essentially.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
By just focusing on race and not looking at class as a whole, looking
Yeah.
at how
When it comes
literally
down to it, I
who
think
we are
class is
literally,
really, yeah.
exactly. And that's
Um,
how class is the reason why women end up in pornography and prostitution. Like,
absolutely.
it's
Yeah.
not their color. And then as soon as they are in the market, as soon as that, it actually becomes identity based again. It's these,
Yeah.
so it's like literally like, porn is very intersectional. No, it's, like, in that sense, that there's space for all races of
All
women
to be abused.
to be abused. But again, yeah, we have to talk class based and especially, and also sex class based. And I think that's gotten lost. And stop listening
Yeah.
to pimps and traffickers. Stop saying sex work. I will say it once more, and I will say it again. This word and this term to like literally put up this smoke screen of this word work. Work has nothing to do
Yeah.
with sex. Sex is not labor. There is no way of making this a labor at all. It's paid rape, and paid rape is not excusable on no levels. The normalization of all of this stuff, all of this self-objectification as a form of validation is just a way of, like, increasing depression and body dysmorphia rates worldwide, and yeah, like creating even more of a like sex stereotypes, and actually cementing them more and making them like more of a norm. And it's the least that we want. And yeah, anyway, speak up,
Yeah.
all of us.
Well, thank you so much, Roxy, for everything you're doing, for speaking with me. I'm so grateful that we connected and that we had this episode. And yeah, you've given me so much to think about. Oh my God. So thank you.
No worries.
Of course.